Hey there, welcome into an AFC Championship version of Bills Take Two. He's Vic Carucci, I'm Jonathan Acosta. We're getting you set for the massive AFC Championship game going down Sunday at Arrowhead between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills team looking to knock off the defending champs. And Vic, before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the matchup, let's just first take a sec to sort of put this in the context of the bigger picture, especially when we talk about the expectations for this Bills team at the beginning of the season and the fact that we're even talking about them playing for a chance to go to the Super Bowl here now in late January.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, I think there are other words we could use to describe it. I'm going to say this. In terms of what I thought the Bills would be this year, playoffs were there. I had little doubt they were going to qualify and make the playoffs. If we were having a conversation about this team being in an AFC Championship game while you and I were on the sidelines at St. John Fisher for training camp, might have been a little bit. I might have checked, if you were drinking something other than water. But look, that's where they are, and how have they gotten here? Exceeding expectations. I mean, we can say that from the outside. I'm not so sure internally they felt that way. I think there was great belief within this team that they were good enough to do this. But what we were looking for from the outside was how much they had to overcome with the departures of key players on both sides of the ball. It's kind of become a cliche to describe this team that way, but it's still a fact that they not only overcame it, they became better. They became so complete. And I think, Jonathan, I would argue this is as complete a team that the Bills have fielded as I've ever seen in my many years of being around them.
If you had asked what I was taking, I would have told you it was some ayahuasca I got from Aaron Rodgers. Moving on, though, it's almost fitting that if the Bills want to get finally over this hump, they have to go slay the dragon of the Chiefs, the one that's knocked them out 3 times in the playoffs in their own home in Arrowhead. And I guess the question is that, you think back to the AFC Championship game that they lost, the 13 seconds game, the loss here in Orchard Park last year, a 3-point loss. Why do you feel like this Bills team is positioned to maybe be the one that finally gets it done?
Yeah, I think you first of all have to look at the regular season, as much as that is easy to dismiss because of the 0-3 postseason record against the Patrick Mahomes Chiefs. The 4-1 Josh Allen record against this team in the regular season counts for something. It counts for a team that knows how to handle this matchup and has even shown in those postseason losses, most of them, 2 of them at least, that they are capable of going toe-to-toe, that this isn't an opponent that is so much better that they don't have a chance of beating. And then this version of the Chiefs, that's another thing to consider. Looking at the fact that they set a record with 11 one-score wins this year, and of course in Patrick Mahomes' case, 11 fourth-quarter comebacks, also leading the league. So they live on the edge, and when you live on the edge that much, sometimes that edge isn't there for you to live on it. Sometimes you slip and you fall. And I look at Buffalo, and while they have had far from a perfect season, but I have seen much more capability of them to do the things offensively, especially, that would allow them to not only go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs, but have an edge, be a little bit better. And of course, the game being at Arrowhead makes it that much more of a challenge. But I look at this Bills team, the confidence they have from top to bottom, and belief in what they do, how it works, the completeness, the team-first attitude, the bonding that's gone on. It's more than just lip service. There really is something about the way this team has come together. And Jonathan, I'll do this old guy thing. Takes me back to when I saw the Bills of the late 1980s that were called the Bickering Bills. I came up with that name, and a lot of people didn't like that, especially within the team. But that was their nickname because of all the internal fighting. And yet they found a way to start bonding as a club, this Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, Bruce Smith, Darryl Talley version. And once that bonding occurred, they became a team that we saw, reach the Super Bowl 4 consecutive years.
Vic, I agree wholeheartedly, because talking with the team this week, you hear Josh Allen talk about how maybe the Josh Allen of the past pitches that ball to James Cook on that 3rd and goal. Or you hear Amari Cooper, a veteran Pro Bowler in this league, talk about how when he was on those championship teams at Alabama, the team doesn't need you because everyone's doing their job. The ego gets set aside because you put it aside for the betterment of the team. There seems to be sort of a maturity to this team that maybe it was always there in seasons past, but certainly seems to stick out even more this year. Part of that maturity is the ball security from this team, and also the sort of evolution on offense of not having to rely as much on Josh Allen and having a run game that they can rely on. Although the past 2 games against the Chiefs, in the regular season and that playoff loss last year, Josh Allen was the leading rusher for the Bills in both of those games. Vic, I think we're maybe safe to assume, or maybe we're not, you can tell me, that we expect that to be different this time around, and the Bills maybe be able to have some success on the ground with their running backs.
I do think that the commitment to the run is vital, but I don't know that the Bills can get away with doing it to the extent that they have in these last 2 playoff wins against Denver and against Baltimore, where it was so skewed heavily in favor of the run game and that the pass game was kind of an afterthought. I don't know that you can beat Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs team without Josh Allen having a Josh Allen level game through the air, along with what he can do as a runner, along with the running game in general, what it can do. And to the point of maturity, yes, I think it's important. All things do start with Josh, not just from a performance standpoint, but an attitude standpoint, a mindset perspective. He is the one who does I think, as incredible a job as any player who is a superstar and who plays the top position, QB1, how he is able to suppress his ego, how he is able to understand that it doesn't all have to be him, and the way he is controlling himself in the course of games. I know there was that joke about how tempted he was to do that pitch to James Cook near the goal line, and that became a bit of a story this week, and the little gleam in his eye, all of that. But along the way, he explained, he saw the potential for that to go bad. And he's not, I wouldn't say he or Joe Brady as offensive coordinator or Sean McDermott as head coach are necessarily playing in fear. In fact, I think they play with great confidence, but it's a little different, that it's confidence that more than one aspect of the offense can function, and certainly a whole bunch of people, as receivers, as runners, the offensive line, all of it can come together. And of course, on defense, doing its job to complement the offense. And I think all of those aspects of understanding that you don't have to do more than your job, but make sure you do your job, follow your assignment, is going to give you the best chance to win.
Vic, one more question on the offensive side of the ball. How difficult of a task is this going to be? I guess the chess match between Joe Brady and Steve Spagnuolo, one of the most feared defensive coordinators in the NFL, such a huge reason for the success the Chiefs have had on this run. The Bills got the better of them in that matchup here in Orchard Park earlier in the season. The Bills seemingly had the answers for what the Chiefs were going to present. But this is a second meeting, and again, Spags is one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. How do you see that chess match sort of playing out, what it's going to come down to?
It's going to be a very challenging chess match for Joe Brady. I think he's made a lot of right moves and sound decisions with his work as both a designer of game plans, but also a play caller. Now, you could criticize what happened in the second half against the Ravens this past week, where the offense maybe got a little too conservative and drifted away from balance between run and pass that was necessary to make sure you didn't find yourself in the position the Bills found themselves, which is a Baltimore team that ultimately got down, scored, and nearly tied the game and could have easily forced overtime the way things were unfolding, and the Bills recovering that onside kick. But Steve Spagnuolo is as good as it gets as a defensive coordinator. I mean, Hall of Fame credentials for the work he has done as a coordinator. He will design a scheme, and he has the advantage now of not only knowing what Josh did against his team in the regular season, but also what he has seen him do in the playoffs. And keep in mind that extra time the Chiefs had, nearly 3 weeks of not having to really prepare for games because of that number one seeding they got in the AFC, the bye that comes with that, so they could focus on the potential opponents that they'd face in this round. And the Bills were certainly at the top of that list. The Ravens were too, but I'm sure that there is going to be a lot different that Josh is going to see in the way of fronts and coverages, and just the whole overall scheming of this Chiefs defense. Chris Jones, as good as it gets up front, and his ability to move around the offensive line. You got Karlaftis, you got Tranquil. Go down the list of players that I think, and in the back end as well, that can make it difficult to find success. But I do think the Bills still need to be true to themselves, need to be sound, and more important than anything, obviously, don't turn it over.
You alluded there to the Chiefs secondary. I see McDuffie, one of those players to watch out for. Though it's interesting because against Houston, they kind of put him on Nico Collins and basically said, take Collins out of this game. Against Buffalo, again, with the Bills, everybody eats offense. There's not just one player you can stick them on because this Bills team will just throw it to whoever's open. On the defensive side of the ball, let's start with the injuries. The Bills' Friday injury report literally coming out as we're speaking right now. Taylor Rapp is out. 2 players are questionable in Balin Spector and Christian Benford. The good news here is that Matt Milano and Taron Johnson, full participants Friday. They have no injury designation for this game, meaning they are good to go. Just when you hear that injury report, where does your mind first go to, Vic?
Yeah, it goes right to that safety position. Having Taylor Rapp out of the lineup could be a problem, especially when you're dealing with Patrick Mahomes and this passing attack. We know all the different layers that he has, the newer targets that are aboard in DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. I say newer because, of course, the old standby is another future Hall of Famer like Mahomes in Travis Kelce. And how do you deal with him? And he, after an unspectacular regular season, comes up with 7 catches, leads the game that they had against Houston in receptions and yards. And he is in rarefied air in playoff production like his quarterback. That is going to be, I think, a greater challenge now that Rapp is out of the lineup. And yes, Cole Bishop replaces him, but Cole Bishop, less of a rookie than he was at the earlier in the year, beginning of the year, but making his first postseason start on the second largest stage in the NFL. That's something to look at. I don't know that he blinks or flinches. I'm not suggesting he won't be up to the task of at least handling it emotionally. But there's a reason Taylor Rapp has been the starter, the experience that he brings to the table, and just the general quality of his play to be in there as a starter along with Damar Hamlin. So is that something the Chiefs go after? Andy Reid and Matt Nagy, his offensive coordinator, and Patrick Mahomes? Absolutely.
Last year in the playoffs, the Bills had no Matt Milano, no Terrell Bernard. This matchup in the regular season, the Bills had Terrell Bernard. He did a great job against Travis Kelce. I think he was limited to just 2 catches for 8 yards or something like that. This time in the playoffs, they're going to have both Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard. Just how key are both of those guys going to be against a Travis Kelce that, no matter what his regular season looks like, seemingly elevates his game to that Hall of Fame level in the postseason?
Well, it's more than just focusing on Kelce. I think this is a layered situation. It starts, of course, with that Chiefs offensive line and taking Joe Thuney from the guard position and putting him out at left tackle. That's been 5 games, of course, counting that playoff game against Houston, 5 in a row that he's been there. He has had some issues handling quarterback pressures, giving up sacks, but he's been generally a much better answer than they had there previously. So protection would be one thing, because why? For the obvious reason of a quarterback being able to make play, but in Patrick Mahomes' case, those plays that he tends to connect with Kelce, those plays on which he connects with him, are ones that require that extra time, buying those extra steps that he can do with his ability and mobility to feel the pocket and that deft sense that he has of where pressure is coming from. And in the meantime, there's only so much you can do to keep Kelce covered. He's crafty enough to find his way into those open seams. And then the other layer is, I mentioned those 3 receivers that have game-breaking ability in Hopkins, Brown, and Worthy. You got to account for them. And as they are running their patterns, as they are pulling some coverage away, you've got to, in the meantime, you've got Kelce, who can slow play coming out into his route, as he often does. Figure, his quarterback instincts, his former quarterback life. He knows how to handle those routes in a way that the quarterback sees them, and that's important. And yes, I give much credit to Terrell Bernard, to Matt Milano for how they can handle things in coverage, their instincts. But there's only so much you can do. Kelce's going to get his catches. And as we heard Bobby Babbage, the defensive coordinator, talk during the week, when he was asked, well, why don't you just bang on him? Why don't you just have somebody hit him within those 5 yards legally to slow up his routes and reroute him and, just disrupt the rhythm between Kelce and Mahomes. And Babbage said it's not as simple as that, because you have to also account for yet another layer. And guess what that is? That's a running game. Okay, and the Chiefs have that too. And you with Kareem Hunt, with Isaiah Pacheco, if there isn't enough people in that box and the numbers work out in favor of the Chiefs running the football, Mahomes is going to that. So if you're going to pay attention to Kelce or cover him, something else is going to open.
Vic, you bring up Bobby Babbage, so I'm going to ask you the question that must be keeping him and Sean McDermott up all week. How do you force a quarterback who doesn't make mistakes in the playoffs into making mistakes in the playoffs? Because we talk about this Bills offense and how they control time of possession and they run the ball and they don't commit mistakes. They win the turnover battle. Well, part of winning the turnover battle is that the defense has to force those turnovers, and that's something that the Bills won in large part because of against Baltimore, forcing those 3 turnovers against the Ravens. The Chiefs offense sort of operates a lot like this Bills offense does right now. They don't turn the ball over in the postseason, and they let the other team make those mistakes. So if the Bills are going to go out there and take care of the football, how does this defense go out there and force interceptions, fumbles, sacks against a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, who just simply doesn't do that in the postseason?
Pressure, pressure, pressure. This has to be a big game up front for all of those D linemen. Certainly the blitzing that will happen that Babbage can do on occasion, but it has to start with Greg Rousseau making as many plays as he can, and he has been rising to the occasion. Von Miller, the veteran, has found his way into some impactful plays, even on a limited basis. A.J. Epinesa, Ed Oliver, go down the list. But those D linemen have to be as effective as possible against what is the weakness of the Chiefs. It is their offensive line. They don't do an airtight job of protecting Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes protects himself in so many ways, with his feel for pressure, with his instinctive way of knowing where receivers are or knowing when it's time for him to bail out and run. And they have to cut off those opportunities or be aware of it. So is it similar to what happened against Lamar Jackson, where they basically took Damar Hamlin and made him a spy? And he did a decent job of that. I mean, Jackson still got some production as a passer. I think in the case of Mahomes, he'll be a more dangerous guy if you're forcing him just into the pocket. He's going to make some plays, make some throws. And then when you're getting that pressure, the coverage has to be exceptional. Obviously, with some key names, Christian Benford being one of them in that questionable category. Obviously, with coming out of concussion protocol, the hope for the Bills has to be that he is spot on with his game, and then the depth that they have in the secondary also steps up as the Chiefs, just like the Bills, try to stress you out, try to put as many targets out there as possible. And what also can be a factor in terms of the turnovers is stopping the run. Don't let the Chiefs get into a rhythm creating groove of running the football, because that is another way that you can put a quarterback in an uncomfortable position and force mistakes.
Vic, let's end with this. We've talked with the players this week, and they know what's on the other side of this game, especially if they win. And they've talked about how they sort of know that, but they don't let their mind sort of go there, just trying to keep that one game, that 1 week at a time mentality. We don't have to do that, though. I can ask you, as someone who's covered this team for decades and knows what goes on in this city when there's an opportunity like this, what would it mean for this group of players, for this team, and for this city if this Bills team can go into Arrowhead and knock off the Chiefs on Sunday?
I'm telling you, I get emotional just thinking about it, and it's not that of a fan or someone who's not objective. I pride myself on that. We are journalists. Let's stay there. But the emotion comes from understanding, living in this community for as long as I have with my family, having seen what the heartbreak of 4 consecutive Super Bowl losses did, and being part of that, and around that team, being part of that coverage for all those years, and as close as I was to see those players who are now looking at this team, will they have the answer? Is this the incarnation? And then thinking about, I even think about my own kids, who are not really kids, they're adults now, but how they were really too young mostly to appreciate what a Super Bowl run was all about. And there reached a point where people started to take that for granted, where I use this phrase, and others did, that the Super Bowl was just kind of built in to the Bills' schedule. That's how it was back in the 90s, Jonathan. We're not at that point, of course, with this team. It feels like we've talked Super Bowl with them for a long time, certainly since the 2020 season. So that does feel like an extended period of the Super Bowl conversation. But to be on the brink here, to be, and it's so different than what it was back in after the 2020 season, which was a COVID year, which just didn't have the same feel. And it was, yes, it was at Arrowhead, just as this one is, but the excitement that was generated by it was muted by that. There's no muting the excitement over this team. So when I talk about, again, being emotional for a community that I love, a place where, it has been so good to us, our family, to myself, and the engagement with the fan base here of talking about their favorite subject all the time, Buffalo Bills. They get to the Super Bowl, and I strongly feel, Jonathan, they get there, they win. I feel very good about where the tidal wave is going, and I feel very good about their chances Sunday in this game, and I can't even fathom what it's going to feel like, not only for them to get there, but then what happens after that.
Vic, I think Spencer Brown summed up the emotions best this week. He said, after the game, the emotions are either going to be extreme elation or he's going to be with a 24-pack by himself. We'll see which end of that spectrum Bills Mafia is feeling right around 9:30, 10 o'clock on Sunday night. Kickoff at Arrowhead is set for 6:30. We'll either be discussing a Bills loss or the Bills going to their first Super Bowl in 3+ decades. He's Vic Carucci. I'm Jonathan Acosta for Channel 2 Sports.